Hello, this is Kim Anderson, and this is the penultimate episode on this podcast, The Never Ending Experiment. This is episode 19, and I'm just doing one more episode after this, and then I'm wrapping it up. And today I want to talk about ableism. Ableism is basically when people are discriminatory towards disabled people. Now, I've had a disability my whole life, but it's degenerative, so it's gotten worse over the years, and it has really allowed me to see different levels of ableism, different types of ableism. I've been genuinely shocked by some of the behavior that I've seen, some of the attitudes that I've experienced from able-bodied people. The word disability today has kind of morphed and taken on a lot of different meanings. I think today, for most practical reasons, a lot of disability just means it just has to do with work. Now, I've been through a lot of these programs and, I filled out tons of forms on the subject, and the word disability really does change based on what the definition is for that purpose. So one way to look at it is that we're all disabled in some ways, all human beings are disabled at breathing underwater or flying. These are abilities we simply don't have as an entire species. But of course, for individuals, those abilities generally have to do with the ability to navigate in this human-centered world that we've created. However, then there's the other level of disability where it's really about, regardless of the human-centered world, you may or may not survive in the wild on your own if you have a disability. So a lot of those disabilities are very dependent on context. There's definitely a big difference between a slight disability and a severe disability. I mean, of all of the sort of minorities and marginalized groups that get talked about, I don't think there's any as diverse as disability, because there's any part of your body can change. There's countless disabilities and new ones coming up every day. We simply can't really even define them all, because just like medicine, we are a species that evolves and changes with time, and so new diseases come up and new disabilities can come up in unpredictable ways. And not only that, but everybody who's able-bodied could hypothetically become disabled themselves as well, and the longer you live, the more likely that is to happen. There's even people who just assume that all old people are disabled, which it's not necessarily true. Most people slow down with their age, but the idea that everyone will become disabled and need a lot of help, I think, is simply wrong. It's a strange way to view life, I think. Now, my experiences have definitely changed over the years. My perception of it has changed. There's definitely been a shift over the last 10 years towards societal disintegration and a general lack of empathy. So people in general are not hanging out with each other, looking out for each other, keeping in touch. Those kinds of things definitely have influenced disabled people, I think, a lot, because we often rely on community and on other people, especially in Alberta, especially what's going on now. I think this is a really bad time to be disabled. I've had to really work on my own psychology and my own kind of mental wellness to be able to deal with the difficulties, because my stresses have increased, and there's less to depend on from the government, from the economy, from family, from friends. And that's been really tough. I mean, I kind of put off addressing this subject in some ways because of how depressing it is, in some ways because maybe leaving it to the end, I wanted to be able to get the message out as much as possible, even if people don't listen to my whole podcast. I do hope more people listen to this because this is something that I've really lived. This is something that it's not about reading it up. A lot of people who are studying this kind of thing, I think, are getting a lot of misinformation. And I think mainly it's for the reason that because disabled people are so diverse, we're bound to have very different opinions from each other. And it can be really extreme. If you look at one of the big issues like euthanasia or medically assisted suicide, this issue has been the most extremely argued for and argued against by disabled people. They have been the strongest voices supporting it and not liking it. And the reason why it's been supported is actually for people with similar diseases to myself, with weakening diseases. Because as you get weaker and weaker, life gets harder and harder. And it's also no longer possible to take your own life in a normal way. An able-bodied person, I don't think, would need access to medically assisted suicide because they could do it themselves. Now, the reason why a lot of disabled people are against assisted suicide is precisely for the reason that other people are using it to get rid of them. They're using it as a form of murder to pressure disabled people into just ending their lives rather than investing in them, investing in taking care of them. And so it's a way of abandonment to just say, well, you can just kill yourself anyway, so I don't want to have to take care of you, which is really cruel, but it's really real. And that kind of brings me to just the abuse of disabled people, because that's really the core of ableism, and that's really the dark side of it. I mean, I want to go through the different types of ableism that I have witnessed, but abuse is definitely the most real, the most harsh, and the most overlooked. I can't tell you how many times I have seen these charities or people just adulating over the relatives of disabled people. They don't even really talk about the disabled people. They're just like a prop in this weird do-goodery where it's like they give more credit, care, praise to the people taking care of disabled people rather than actually looking at the disabled person themselves and feeling sorry for them. They feel more sorry for the people who are taking care of disabled people from the people that are actually suffering. Like, that is so arrogant. So that is very, very ableist. And it also leads directly to the abuse I was talking about. Because unfortunately, a lot of times when people are spending all of their time and energy taking care of a disabled person, they burn out and they get resentful and they aren't able to cope. And I think the reason for that is that it shouldn't be one person who's doing all of the caretaking for another disabled person. It should really be a community effort. And if it was a community effort, it wouldn't burn anyone out because all of those different jobs and all of those different things that they would require would be shared. So that's the irony of the whole thing, is that people get afraid of disabled people and they get afraid of them becoming dependent on them. So instead of helping them in a way that won't burn them out and that they will be able to continue, they just ignore them and they run away. And this has happened to me now like 99% of the time. I mean, I haven't gone to that many people to ask for help, but I've only gone to the people that are closest to me. And now what I've experienced is the majority of them have just rejected me outright or lied to my face, said they were going to, be there for me, said that the relationship was fine and there was no issues, and then completely disappeared. This has happened now over and over again to the point where I'm no longer comfortable asking for help. If someone offers help, then, maybe they'll find a way to take it. And there have been some people who have offered help. I don't want to say this is 100% of the people, but these are new people. These aren't people that I know very well. So within the people that I know, all of the people that were closest to me, closest friends, closest family members, those are the people that have harmed me the most. So think about that when you go and you think you're going to like praise this person for taking care of a disabled person. And it's like, that person, unfortunately, is potentially an abuser. Like, you shouldn't assume that they are, but you also shouldn't assume that they're not. You really, really, really should not just assume anything about those kind of situations, especially if that person is trying to bring attention to themselves as the caretaker rather than give attention to the actual disabled person, because the number one thing that would help a caretaker of someone who's very severely disabled would be to have someone else be able to help that disabled person. So not all the weight was on their shoulders. But if they're not doing that and they're just looking for praise, you're looking at a potentially abusive situation. And I think we kind of have to be a little more aware without being, paranoid and suspicious. I'm not saying go out and start accusing people of abuse. I'm saying understand that the disabled person is the one who's suffering. That's what people don't seem to understand. They always seem to pawn off the troubles to someone else. They'll look for this caretaker around them. And I can sort of understand that in situations where people are severely cognitively disabled and they can't communicate and they can't function and they're not very aware. In those situations, like that they're not able to really communicate, then they do depend on other people around them to do that communication. But I'm just saying you have to be aware that there is a lot of abuse of disabled people. Too much care is given from one person instead of it being shared amongst a number of different people, in which case you have a lot more checks and balances, you have a lot less burnout, you have a lot more socializing for the disabled person. You just have a better situation overall. I have not experienced that at all. This is the ideal situation, but this is the same exact type of thing that you would want also for the elderly and also for children, for anybody who's not able to fully support themselves. I really wish people would stop doing that. Like, stop looking around the disabled person. And I think the reason that happens too is that people are profoundly uncomfortable with disability because it reminds them of their own fragility, of their own mortality, of the fact that they could also become disabled too. Right? It is uncomfortable. I'm not a fan of going to the hospital. Like, I don't like seeing surgeries or any of this kind of thing. Like, people are squeamish about the body disintegrating. Look at the entire horror movie genre. I mean, most of that is really about dying and about sickness. Most of those images, those frightening images of zombies, and those are sick people, profoundly sick people. So we have this instinct to sort of, to shrink away, especially with contagious diseases, right? Because you see a contagious disease, you immediately go into fear, like, I don't want to get sick too. So there's a lot of fear around disability, and I've definitely felt that from people, but they've never really been honest about it. And I don't know if it would help if they were honest about it, because it's like the behavior kind of speaks for itself. If you are in a position where you have a disabled person in your life and you want to be able to help them, really understand what you're capable of doing. Because the fact is, as I said, like, it shouldn't all land on one person's shoulders. And if we all cared for each other in a way that's a lot more balanced, it wouldn't be such a problem. The irony that I have found is that the people that are most capable of doing things often get the most help at doing those things, even though they don't need any help at all. And the people that need the most help get the least help. It's very twisted. I never, ever would have imagined how twisted some people's mentality are about disability. And I think a lot of it is that they really do make disabled people invisible. I mean, I can't help but be a little bit paranoid when I've just experienced so much ignorance around me that I really didn't expect it. That means my expectations were higher than they should have been. I remember seeing a post that came up from the government that was asking for nominations on people who were going out of their way to help disabled people. And there was nothing. There was no responses. There weren't any people. So think about that. If disabled people don't even have anybody that they would say is going out of their way to help them, and there's nobody doing it, and then the government does the same thing, there's so much pressure on parents and partners and close family members to do all of the work for their disabled members, but that doesn't work. But I think in general, if we were all healthier about reproduction, we simply wouldn't have those disabilities to start with. And this leads to another big division in disabled discussions. Whereas, like, if it's a good thing or a bad thing, because there are some people that think like, oh, you can just accept your disability and it's fine. Or like if they say like differently abled, or like they put it in a really positive light that they're just different. But if you're just different, then it's not a disability, because the disability has to do with not being able to fully participate. And I do think that's negative. Now, when I was younger, again, in my 20s, when I was still able to walk a lot, to carry a lot, and do a lot of physical work, back then, I didn't see myself as disabled. I did have braces on. I wasn't able to run. But I didn't see myself as necessarily disabled or very disabled, right? So I've seen the progression in myself. I've seen that happen for me. And one of the most annoying things that I have found with ableism is the judgment from other people who are like, I remember people just sort of being amazed at how much I did back then, and like so impressed with how much I was doing, and I was traveling and I was doing all this stuff. And I thought, what do you expect me to do? Like, just sit at home? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. And now that I'm way more disabled, that I do have to sit at home a lot and that I can't do those things, then you get the judgment like, oh, like maybe I could be doing it if I wanted to. And it's like, I have a different disability now. I have a different disease now. The way that it exists in my body is not the same. So it's been literally impossible to get this message out. I feel so exasperated by the ignorance around me, by some of the judgments, by some of the ignorant statements that I've heard from otherwise educated people. Now, again, because we live in this time where we're expected to be so specialized, that's another big hindrance to the disability, because a lot of times when they try to measure disability, especially for the government, they'll be like, can you do this? Can you do that? But a lot of times it's like, okay, I could do that in the moment, but then I wouldn't be able to do it again for a week, Or yes, I could do this activity for 5 minutes at a time, so long as I take an hour break between every 5 minutes. You know what I mean? So just because you can do something in one moment, if your body doesn't immediately recover and you can't continue to improve at it, then it's not a sustainable way to work. So that can't happen. And that's the problem with measuring disabilities, and that they are all so different, is that it's not just about what you can do, it's about what you can recover from. And it's also about how long you can do that. The fact is that repetitive activity isn't that great for anyone. We could do like a certain amount of repetitive activity for a while, but then you need to do other activities. And that's why we've seen so many people burn out in their jobs, because of that specialization. We're expected to do one thing, and this is a big reason why my philosophy has changed so much about career. And I don't believe in focusing anymore. I can get pretty severe tunnel vision, and I've spent hours and hours and hours doing the same type of work. And I have done really, really repetitive work in the past. But in the end, I don't think that is good in the long run, because it will lead to burnout. It will lead to these other physical issues that come from doing the same thing over and over again. I think I've talked about sort of the main discussions and disagreements in the disability world. I think the one thing that we're all in agreement on is that we need more money. We definitely need more money. I think that's absolutely essential. The fact that the Canadian government knows that $2,000 was about enough for a regular person during the pandemic, and suddenly that they think that that's going to be less than that for a disabled person now, 4 years later, is really, really scary. I mean, $2,000 is like bare minimum. Most disabled people require more money in order to be able to cater to the many different ways that their disability impacts their life, which can be it can be so many other domino effects that it's hard to even calculate. And that's the problem when you get into these strict budgets. People's lives don't work within strict budgets, no matter what you're working on. I mean, it's crazy how much they expect people to know and predict and understand what's going to happen to them next year or 3 years or 5 years into the future. We simply don't know that. I've never got that right. Every time I have to sit down and go through those things and predict how much you're going to drive your car or whatever you're going to be doing, it's like nobody knows these things. And yet we expect each other to know it. And it's just crazy. It's very, very hard for disabled people. It was very hard for me when I went back to university. I had no idea what kind of supports or accessibility I would need because I hadn't done any of these activities in about 7 years at that time. You know, I hadn't done those things for so long. I hadn't written a test in so long, so I didn't know. I didn't understand what I would need, and they expect you to know everything. They expect you to do so much extra work if you're disabled. And this is one of the big ableist things that happens that really, really holds people back, is the expectation that you are going to know and be able to do enough to make the accommodations for yourself. It's amazing how much people expect you to do your own accommodations without any money, without any extra help. So it's like you already know that you're disabled enough to not do the basic amount needed for a regular job. And yet they expect you to do extra to be able to justify that. And you can't. Disabled people can't do that. I will never be able to go back to the ignorance that I had when I was less disabled about just how selfish people are. I will now have red flags come up that I never had before because the people that I thought were so nice and so kind and so generous have proven to me that they were not. So I can't ever be that ignorant again. And it makes me sad when I hear less disabled people and able-bodied people just be so naive about that. And people genuinely believe there are people in their life that will be loyal to them, but they've never tested it. And you simply don't know. Your adoring husband or your best friend since childhood can drop you and you won't see it coming. And unfortunately, it's one of those things you have to go through it in order to see it. So now that I've gained this knowledge, I can never go back. I see people very, very differently now. And I'm far less likely to have any of those doors open that used to be open because now I'll be able to see, even if I magically say I become totally normal and able-bodied, I won't make the same friends again because now I know. And I won't be open to the same kind of situations or people because now I understand I was basically investing in relationships that weren't what I thought they were. So that's changed a lot. So making suggestions that are really off base, I mean, I think there's ways of addressing things if you really feel like you found a therapy that you really think could work for someone. Like, I don't think you have to hold back on that. Like, of course you can make a suggestion, but if they shut you down, you just have to respect that. You just have to understand they're not open to it. That's not where they're at. Maybe they tried something similar to that in the past and it didn't work for them. Like the suggestion that I should try working out is like, okay, you really don't know what my life has been like, and you really don't know all of the things that I've tried. And I've gone through so many different things that I've tried, and it's not easy to go through all of that. It's not easy to have that up and down where people get so excited about something really simple that's not actually going to help you, but they just don't know better. And it's not that hope is bad. I mean, I'm pretty much living off of hope right now. I am. But I think it's also because fundamentally what I've seen of the research and what's going on right now, there is strong actual evidence that the treatments can work. Disability and poverty are intimately intertwined. If you're really, really poor, you're far likelier to get disabled. If you're disabled, you're far likelier to get poor. And it is this downward spiral that we really need to understand better, and we really need to fix it. We need to fix it. And I think, honestly, that basic income is the way out, because there's no way for anybody outside of an experience to know enough to be able to help the people that are having that experience. But we live in a world that lives off of money, and we need more money for disabled people every single month so that they can cover all of these different, unusual, unexpected costs to be able to try new treatments that have never been tried before. Sometimes they don't work, and you shouldn't lock people into things that don't work. There's so much unknown about medicine, and there's so much that's changing. So we really, really need that flexibility in order to help different people, in order for people to help themselves, because the fact is, not every disease works the same in every different individual. So we need that individualized medicine. We need that individualized care. We need better opportunities in work and in labor. And I think basic income is the way out of that. So I think I covered everything that I wanted to say about ableism. It's not an easy subject to go over because there's just so much pain that I have experienced because of it. It's one thing to have a disability that could interfere with your own ability to survive, regardless of other people, but it's quite another thing when people destroy your ability to survive in addition to the disability already harming you. So I've got one more episode. I'm going to be back in a couple weeks to finish this off, and that episode is going to be about community. And you'll notice I did not say disabled or disability community, because there isn't one. Or there might be one, there might be some disabled people who hang out with each other, but the fact is that we really, really overuse the word community, and I do not use that word in relation to disabled people because I know how isolated a lot of disabled people are. And when you say community, you give the impression that there is a group of people that talk to each other and agree with each other and discuss everything. And then all you have to do is talk to one disabled person and suddenly you know everything about all disabilities, but you don't, because there isn't a community, okay? A trait is not a community. So I'm going to talk about that in a couple weeks. That's going to be my last episode. And I hope everyone's doing well. This is Kim Anderson on The Never Ending Experiment. Thanks for your time.